Hello, everyone. Okay, I am live now. There was a period of time there where I was talking to myself and hadn't clicked the live button. Classic me. Okay, well, now I'm here. Welcome, and thank you to everyone. Oh, thank you to everyone who is here live. I have a very special science versus bullshit in a slightly different order this week, or slightly different format, more to the point. I thought I'd do some slides because I was writing notes anyway, and then I got carried away with it. And now here we are. So I have notes. I have some topics. As always, I want you guys to interact live. So anything that you do have that's come up this week or that you're confused about, or that I've spoken about but you're still confused about, or basically anything I can help you with in the next 30 to 45 minutes, that's what I'm here for. So this is my second live of the day. Did one with Chloe earlier, which was great. By the way, if you're interested in joining the EC method, you don't have long to do that. We start next Monday. We've got quite a lot of new things. We've got some resources on coming off Monjaro because that's something that's come up a lot recently with people signing up. But yeah, if you want to talk to me about that, then shoot me a message after this. But I will get on with the first myth that came up this week. So I was sent a video maybe, I think about 4 times of this man who was basically listing the worst exercises for menopausal women to do. If you've been here for more than 5 minutes, you'll know that there are no universally bad exercises for someone to do. Obviously, if it hurts you or you're injured or you hate it, or there's some kind of negative consequence for you personally, not a great exercise modality for you. But for any other reason, like there is no bad exercise to be doing. So he was saying basically that menopausal women shouldn't run, shouldn't cycle, shouldn't do body pump, shouldn't do CrossFit. And the main reason was that they are too stressful on the postmenopausal body. I don't even actually know if he was talking about menopause as in perimenopause as well, or just postmenopause. I don't know. He didn't really specify. But anyway, ridiculous statement. I have a ton of perimenopausal, postmenopausal women who love running, love cycling, some who are doing CrossFit because that's their thing. It's certainly not universally too stressful. Now, there may be some women that are struggling with symptoms or for various other reasons where they might just be like, yeah, that's not actually the right form of exercise for me at the moment. Fine. But if you're telling people who enjoy spin class not to do spin class because it's now too stressful and it's going to make them store fat, or they're not going to get results, or they're not going to adapt to it, you are actively damaging women's health. Like, it's not just like crap misinformation because you're trying to sell me your program. It's like, if somebody listens to that and takes that on, you are damaging their health because of that, because there are so many benefits to spin, to body pump. It's not my preferred form of exercise. It would be the first thing I suggest people do, but if they like it, if they enjoy it, if they're consistent with it, is there health benefits to that? Yes, of course. Literally any exercise you enjoy. So that was very silly. I pulled up a few claims and then like what the evidence says from the research that we have at the moment. So this is kind of as a like partially related to this, but it's often thought that there are these like big sex differences between how men and women respond to resistance training. And actually all of the research we have just like simply isn't true. And when you see people claim these differences, it's normally on a very mechanistic level. So they're kind of like, well, assuming that estrogen drops and that impacts the way that your muscles recover, then actually women need to train differently. Or assuming that estrogen has this impact on how anabolic you are, then actually at different stages of your cycle, you need to train differently. And then when you play that out in actual real people and real women, it doesn't seem to have much impact at all. In fact, one really incredible study or meta-analysis really that showed that menstrual cycle, contraceptive use, or even menopause status doesn't really impact the response and adaptations to training that women are getting. So as much as on a theoretical level, estrogen has an impact on the way that muscle recovers, and especially, I won't get too much into that, but anyway, generally the way that muscle recovers, when you play that out with real people, there doesn't seem to be much of an impact. Now, obviously, with all studies that you look at, you're looking at the averages here, right? So there may be some people that do respond in a certain way and other people that don't respond in a certain way. But on average, over the research that we have, like, there actually isn't an impact there. And when it comes to menopausal women, especially not doing HIIT training or spin or running or body pump or CrossFit, there's actually tons of research specifically on modes of exercise that are very, very similar to spin. So this is an area I used to work in. HIIT training protocols tend to be things like 1 minute on, 1 minute off. So it's quite similar to what you'd probably be doing in a spin class, maybe slightly different. You're normally going to some kind of beat or music, but in terms of the adaptations on your body, it's quite a similar stress on your body. And menopausal women, perimenopausal women, and premenopausal women all see huge health benefits to doing this. So all see increases in cardiovascular health, cardiovascular fitness, insulin sensitivity, a small reduction in BMI. Obviously, that's more to do with diet. But my point being, like, it's silly. Silly. You don't need to train in a different way. That's not what the research supports. Then just don't worry so much about that side of things. Is there anything else? I mean, I think any decent coach would be looking at the individual and listening to them about whether menopause is impacting them or not, and in what ways, and what symptoms they have, and adapting training around that. That's all you really need to be focused on. Related to this, I've been sent this a few times, a Dutch test, which basically allows you or claims that you can measure your hormones via a home urine test. This isn't true, and actually there's not a very strong correlation between the amount of estrogen in your urine and the amount of estrogen in your blood. So it's not giving you much of a full picture of what's going on. I think it's now kind of being pushed to be like, hey, do this test, pay us, and we can tell you your menopause status, or we can tell you what's going on with your hormones. That's simply not true. I mean, if it was that easy, then we wouldn't have to be doing so many blood tests. And even on that level, there is no blood test for perimenopause. I think sometimes people get quite frustrated if they go to their doctor and they're like, I want some blood tests so I can check my hormone levels. And what's really hard is, obviously many people know, your hormones fluctuate throughout your cycle. So it's quite hard to tell at which point you're catching that. And it's really it's not as simple as just being like, oh, we can take this test and then tell you what your menopausal status is. Ruth, I loved CrossFit, just can't do burpees or box jump. This is more to do with my knees than being perimenopausal. Yeah. Like, I would love CrossFit if my back allowed it. It's nothing to do with being perimenopausal, obviously, because I'm not yet. But people have injuries and people have things that don't really suit them. So, yeah. Okay. I think the other thing that winds me up about the perimenopause thing is it's just quite patronizing. Like, to be like, oh, and I know it shouldn't really be this case, because I actually like that men talk about menopause as well, but especially when they're telling you not to do something, like, sorry, you can't do this anymore because you're menopausal. And that just that doesn't sit well with me, especially when they're wrong. Slightly different if it was actually genuine and there was research to back up, but there's not. So that kind of annoys me. It's like, you don't just turn into this ridiculously fragile human being as soon as you hit menopause. Oh, and I forgot to put my mic in. Oh, well, hopefully the audio is okay on this. I'm sorry if it's not. Sorry if it's not up to scratch as good as last time. Makes me stabby. Yeah, absolutely get that. Okay, this was the next one. And again, sent to me numerous times this week. Women should be consuming, this is very specific, between 2,000 and 2,400 calories. Now, the truth is, calorie needs vary depending on many things, including your body mass, so like your height and your weight, your muscle mass within that to a smaller extent, your age. Actually, I probably shouldn't put that in, not so much age as much as age might relate to muscle mass potentially. Definitely your activity levels and your goals. So like, if someone's saying, oh, women should be consuming 2,000 to 2,400 calories, in what context, for what? Is that maintenance? Is that a deficit? even then it wouldn't be relevant because some women are in a deficit on 2,000 calories. Most women, your average woman, certainly isn't. So there's no like single normal number that everyone should be aiming for when it comes to calories. Now, I will agree that the kind of like opposing view was that women who are on like 12,000 to 1,500, 1,200 to 1,500 calories, like they're underfueling yourself and those calories are too low. For some women, that will undoubtedly be true. Yeah, for some women, that is way too low, especially if you're active, especially if you're not a small woman. But to then just jump to, do you know what would be right for everyone? 2,000 to 2,400. Again, quite random. Like, I don't know where that comes from. It's just as bad as giving a blanket deficit statement. And many women will gain weight if they eat that many calories. In fact, I would gain weight if I ate that many calories. I just don't expend that much energy. So your maintenance can vary, and it could be, it's very normal to have maintenance needs of anywhere from like as little as like 1,600 calories to as much as like close to 3,000 calories, depending on the individual, depending on how active you are. And really the red flag here isn't the specific numbers given, because actually in context, both 1,200 and 2,400 might be right for somebody, right? It's more that it's being pushed universally to like women should consume X amount of calories. That's definitely not the case. And there's so many factors that influence that. So these are some of the myths that I see come up quite a lot around this kind of blanket statement for people eating a certain amount of calories. One we've just been through, so all women need to eat random number 2,000 calories or something in order to be healthy. Again, as I've already said, this ranges depending on numerous factors, but essentially factors that influence your energy needs. And then the other thing that was said in this post is that anything below 2,000 puts you in this kind of survival mode. That's not true at all. And if you want to lose fat, then obviously you're going to need to be in a deficit. If you have fat to lose, your body's not going to suddenly go into survival mode. It will be like, oh, okay, I need to get this energy from somewhere. Let's use this stored energy, body fat, for fuel. And that's how you lose body fat. Not dangerous to be in a deficit as long as you have fat to lose. And then this one's come up a lot, which is NMN supplementation. So this stands for, and I will only say this once. Can I even remember how to say it? Nicotinamide mononucleotide. Nicotinamide mononucleotide. Anyway, we'll call it NMN, right? It's a form of vitamin, which is a formulation of vitamin and vitamin B. So it's a form of vitamin B. And really at the moment, people are like really excited about its anti-aging properties or potential anti-aging properties. And the way that it works in theory is that you take NMN as the supplement, and then that is transported or transferred, or what's the right word here? Basically becomes NAD plus or NADH. And this is an enzyme that's involved in a lot of biological processes that are involved in aging, or in this instance, hopefully the decline of aging. So what happens when you have decreased NAD plus levels, and this tends to happen as you age, is you get increased inflammation, increased oxidative stress, hypertension, cognitive decline, poorer glucose control. So the aim and the theory is that if you supplement and you restore these NAD plus levels to their healthy, youthful levels, then you would slow down or like reverse some of the aging process, which, in theory sounds great. And, if that was going to work, I'd be all for it. But the current evidence in animals, or most of the current evidence is in animals. And I will say that the evidence in animals is quite interesting. And I'm like, oh, okay, like if that did translate into humans, that would be very interesting. But at the moment, we haven't seen it being translated into humans, despite the fact that we've tried, right? So the only really, I would say, like positive findings so far is that NMN supplementation does seem to increase NAD plus levels, but there is nothing linking that increase in NAD plus levels to an actual increase in outcomes that you would want. So an actual decrease in any of the markers of aging, any like increases in insulin sensitivity, any decreases in hypertension, oxidative stress, all this kind of stuff. So that would be my main concern at the moment. I think it's been massively overhyped, as most supplements are on social media. And why I made this graph here is it's comparing it to exercise. So for those of you maybe listening on the podcast or something, I've made a little graph and it shows outcomes in muscle strength, heart health, brain and cognition, metabolic health and longevity. And it shows what we know the evidence base is for consistent exercise throughout lifespan versus supplementing with NMN even. And there's almost no research, especially not in humans. There's like really nothing to support a lot of these claims. I mean, when I say really nothing, I'm probably being quite generous. Like there is literally nothing. And I've been looking for this. With the evidence for exercise is strong for everything. Like, does it increase muscle strength as you age? Yes. Heart health? Yes. Brain and cognition, like ability throughout aging? Yes. Metabolic health? Yes. Longevity? Yes. Right? So if you're kind of thinking, where should I put my efforts? I would say 100% you should be putting it in focusing on consistent exercise as opposed to looking for quick fixes with supplements. So that's not really anything new. Yeah. And then my kind of current stance on this, and this might change, like if some of the research comes out and it's like, oh, what we were seeing in animals actually does translate into humans, then I'll absolutely change my mind on this. But at the moment, it's not something that I would take or that I would recommend that my clients take. There's not really been any long-term research on its safety either. I don't think it's going to be particularly unsafe, but that's still something to consider. There is some research on at least short-term safety. So most of the studies are between like 6 and 12 weeks. So you don't really know what's happening long-term, but from the perspective of over 6 to 12 weeks, doesn't seem to have any negative impacts. I think the research is really interesting. I like geeking out on that stuff. I just think that it's been massively overhyped. And at the moment, the evidence isn't there to support the claims being made. Now, the only slight negative in my head, and I will say that this is just a hypothesis of mine, but when you start manipulating cell pathways that are actually very tightly regulated by your body, and especially when it comes to aging and cell death and cell processing, sometimes it can be a good thing, sometimes it can be a bad thing. And I would say it might be that this ends up reducing, risk of cancer due to reduction in, inflammation, for example. But it could also be that, like, because of the way you're manipulating those cells, actually that promotes cancer or promotes cancer growth. We don't really know yet. I just think whenever you're playing with cell pathways, you need to be like a little bit careful on that front. So yeah, that's my view on it at the moment. Overhyped and wouldn't bother yet, but hey, that might change. Okay. And then this is a very pretty slide. I'm going to go over your questions now, if you have any live. Two things I want to know. Today is the last day to join the EIQ nutrition course, the EIQ online coaching course, or the EIQ only nutrition side of things. We go into all of this kind of stuff, but in a lot more detail. with a lot more references, with a bit more time to go through the science and the metabolic pathways and what's happening on a cellular level, and then apply it directly to your coaching practice to make you a better coach. So if you do want to sign up to that, it will be open until tomorrow. Today is Monday, so be quick. Message me if you do want to join. We've got some incredible coaches in there, so we're very excited for the next 9 months, because it's a 9-month course, and you will leave it being a fully accredited online EIQ coach. Or if you're doing the nutrition course, you can do that in 4 months, and you will be a fully accredited EIQ nutrition coach. And also I need to mention that the EC method starts on the 8th of September, which is next Monday. And Chloe and I are very excited about that, because it always feels pretty good after summer to get your head back into diet and exercise. And like, if you've got kids, I think this is especially true, and the kids go back to school. But even if you don't have kids, I think, everyone like lets loose a little bit over the summer. So it's good to refocus and get your head back in it. Em's just saying, come and join us. It's going to be so good. Yes, we are going to have a brain baby. Yes. Okay, question here. Was recommended L-glutamine 5 grams a day. I don't eat much meat. Am I wasting my money supplementing this 5 grams a day? Loving your myth busting. Yeah, there's absolutely no need to supplement glutamine. The other thing is glutamine is not an essential amino acid, which means your body can create it anyway. There's absolutely no need to be supplementing that. Interested to know why you were told to supplement it. I think the only relevant time that someone would benefit from supplementing it is if they have had like severe burns. Aside from that, absolutely no need to be doing that. So yeah. And now I can't, that was a big thing a while ago, but I can't really remember why. Anyway, right, okay. Next question. Can you talk about sleep? Wake at 3 a.m. nightly, food, exercise on point. I'm on HRT. I'm 53 years old. Any help? Sometimes that can be like stress, because there are certain peaks in cortisol, and sometimes if you're feeling quite stressed, I'd be considering whether there's an impact of stress on that. I wish I could help you more with the sleep side of stuff. I think the only really good, aside from like, the usual of like, have a wind down routine, have a set bedtime, make sure your bedroom's not too hot, not too cold. And I'd be thinking about like, when you wake up, are you worried about something? Is it to go to the bathroom? Is it because you're too hot? Is it because you're too cold? Like, tell me a little bit more about what's going on. Maybe there's like a few extra things that we could try there. But there are only really good supplements for getting you to sleep. Staying asleep, not really so much. Was recommended ashwagandha to help with stress. Thoughts are, is it nonsense? My thoughts are it's nonsense, but any evidence? So interestingly, Terry, there is evidence on this. And actually there has been, it does show to reduce, I don't know if it was really stress, but anxiety, which is, quite closely linked and often kind of used somewhat interchangeably. So yeah, actually, that is one that can have a small impact. Again, small, and most people suggest that you kind of use it at periods of time where you need it and don't rely on it all the time. But yeah, I would test that one out. That one's not a big no. Whereas L-lysine, that you were also told to take, is like, just eat enough protein. You don't need to be supplementing with anything else from that regard. So you can save yourself some money there. Okay, what else? Why are the last 5 pounds so hard to lose? Okay, so there's numerous reasons for this. The main one being that if it's genuinely the kind of last 5 pounds until you get quite lean, your body will start to push back a little bit. So the leaner you get, the lower your leptin levels will be. And leptin is a hormone that signals to your brain how much stored energy is in your body. So leptin's released by primarily adipose tissue, your fat cells. And then it's kind of saying, this is how much fat you have, this is how much stored energy you have. When you have less stored energy and leptin is lower, then your brain will sense that and it'll be like, right, well, we're going to increase hunger and reduce your drive to move to compensate for that. So that's one of the reasons that when you're trying to get really lean, you end up getting really hungry and you end up getting quite fatigued because your body's trying to preserve energy. Another thing that happens in women is your body will also shut off things that aren't essential. So its priority is like keeping you alive and healthy and having enough energy. So one thing it will shut off is your menstrual cycle, which is energy demanding. And also you don't really want to have a baby if you don't have enough energy for yourself. So that would be one of the reasons why those last kind of 5 pounds are harder to lose. The other reason is that often if you've lost quite a lot of weight, you're used to seeing like weight come off. So you're like, yeah, I'm losing a pound a week, or like, you know, maybe a little bit more some weeks, maybe a little bit less other weeks because of like maybe menstrual cycle and that not that impacting your weight on the scales, even though you might be losing about 1 pound of fat a week, for example. And then as you have less and less to lose, you're going to see your weight drop slower and slower. So it seems like it's harder to lose, but actually as a percentage of your total body weight, you're probably losing about the same amount. And that's actually a better way. If I was going to predict like weekly weight loss, which I'm not going to do, but if I was, and someone was in a percentage deficit, so say they were like, right, I'm going to be in a 15% deficit, and then they end up losing, I don't know, maybe 2 pounds a week initially, which might be 1% of their body weight. And then they start losing closer to 1 pound a week because that's now closer to 1% of their body weight. And then as they only have 5 pounds to lose, hey, they might be losing like half a pound a week, right? And it's so easy to miss half a pound on the scales because they're not particularly accurate with just normal fluctuations day to day, that some weeks it can feel like you've not made any progress when actually you have. So probably all of those things. And also sometimes it's that you're not as motivated anymore because you're like, well, you know what? I've lost most of the weight I wanted to lose. So I don't have as much of a drive to lose more weight. And that's why maybe you see that's why maybe there's like a bit of a motivation and thus adherence issue on that as well. Will we gain belly fat at menopause even if we eat at maintenance calories and lift? Sometimes, not for everyone, but there is a slight redistribution of body fat even at maintenance, especially if you're not taking HRT. So it's the drop in estrogen kind of changes the way women store body fat and means that you'll probably store less around your bum and your arms and more around your middle. So because of the estrogen drop, you tend to store fat kind of more like a man, more like an apple shape, as opposed to the usual pear shape of a woman. This is one of the reasons that cardiovascular disease risk goes up during perimenopause as well. So it can happen. But if you're not gaining weight, it would be like to a small extent. It's not like suddenly all of your fat's going to go to your middle. Okay, maybe I'll do one more. Sorry, I'm just picking which one. Can creatine cause gut issues? For some people, if it does, I'd take it with some like water or something. Sorry, not water. I mean like food and water. Obviously water. No question, but another cancer survivor here who is forever grateful to have you on their team. Thank you. And I love working with you. Okay, I'm shorter and in a deficit, kept up my workouts and steps a few weeks in, feeling achy and energy drained. Okay, it could be that your deficit is too big. And this happens a lot with smaller people because they look at other people's deficits and they're like, I'll just go for something similar. and that leaves them with very little calories to play with. So often smaller people I will have in a slightly smaller deficit. And you just have to accept that the weight loss is going to take a little bit longer, but it's much more sustainable, and it means that you don't feel drained of energy. And as everyone will probably know, because I'm obsessed with talking about energy, I just think energy is the most important thing, and everything becomes easier when you've got energy. Like everything is almost effortless when you have high energy. And honestly, if you focus on energy first, and then try and lose the fat once you have energy, once you have good energy, and maintain that good energy with fat loss, complete game changer. If you're in a deficit and you're absolutely drained, everything becomes harder. And when that starts to impact your sleep, and that's your hunger, and that's your ease of sticking to the deficit that's already a bit too big for you, it just becomes like a really hard uphill battle. Whereas when you have energy, like you can do anything. It's amazing. Okay. I will wrap up this for today. Thank you very much for those who came and watched live. If you do want to talk to me about EIQ, make sure you message me today. And I will be back next week with more science versus bullshit. Send in anything that you've seen or anything you want me to cover or anything you want me to break down. Also, if there's things that I've covered that you're like, I still don't really get that, well, do a different example. Just let me know. I'm more than happy to do that. Okay, have awesome days. Bye.